Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prophet podcast, hosted by Craig Phillips and Jeff Torrey. Visit us at fantasyfootballprophet.com. And now your hosts, Craig and Jeff.
Welcome everybody to the Fantasy Football Prophet podcast. I'm Craig Phillips, joined as always by Jeff Torrey, and finally we're back after that long holiday break there. No Tuesday episode this week, but I'm not sure if anybody would have been listening to Fantasy Football Podcast on 4th of July anyway, so hope you didn't miss us too much, but we're back today with our Breakout Players episode. I know we've gone over Breakout Players probably a lot, but we haven't actually had an actual list of players to go off of yet. We each have come up with 5. Our players who we just kind of think are going to make a big leap this year. That's pretty much the only parameters we have. Just players that are going to make a big leap from their, stats last year to this year. But before we get into that, make sure you guys check us out on Twitter at the FF Prophet. Check out our Instagram, Fantasy Football Prophet. And go to the website, it's fantasyfootballprophet.com. And before we get going, Jeff, I have something, the second installment now of Today's Stat, my segment called Today's Stat. I know. Really cool title, right? I mean, I could have gone with Stat of the Day, but I hear that like on every other radio show podcast. And it has nothing to do with a breakout player, I guess. It kind of does, but it's Antonio Brown. And I know, why am I talking about Antonio Brown? I just want to list off Antonio Brown's first 3 seasons in the NFL.
Okay.
And as we get through my breakout players, it'll make a lot more sense here. In Antonio Brown's very first season in the NFL, 16 catches, 167 yards, and 0 touchdowns. So, non-factor. Second year, he actually kind of broke out a little bit, you can say. He got up to 69 catches, 1,100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, it's still, he broke out slightly, but it's not elite at all. 1,100 yards is kind of there, but 2 touchdowns and only 60-some catches?
True.
His third year, 66 catches, 787, and 5 touchdowns. So, you think of Antonio Brown as being this, the best receiver by far in the league, and he keeps doing it every year? I mean, it wasn't until year 4 when he finally completely broke out. And the reason I say that is because I have 2 players on my list that are year 4 receivers. So it's going to be maybe the Antonio Brown leap.
I'm a big fan of that thinking. I mean, same thing with Elshon and these big wide receivers. Tight ends are even more so. Usually they need another year on top of that to break out. Running backs, they can definitely do it right out the gate, but I get where you're going with that.
Yeah, and I think we've said this a million times how like the Odell Beckham, Mike Evans, Jarvis Landry is in that, and everybody who was in that year, it completely skewed everyone's thoughts on what rookie receivers and young receivers actually can do.
Yeah, we were spoiled with that draft class.
This is more what they're going to be like. And the 2 players I have on my list have very, very similar stats to those second and third years of Brown. So we'll go over that in a minute. So Jeff, we'll just get started here. Number 5. Who is your number 5 breakout player? We'll see.
Number
if
5
I'm the same guy.
breakout player. I have a feeling he might be on yours as well. But I went wide receiver at number 5, Devontae Parker.
Okay.
The man that plays for the Dolphins.
Yep. Devontae Parker. He did make my list, of course. How could I make a breakout player list without Devontae Parker? And he was actually my number 1.
Oh, man.
So
I feel like I ruined that one for you.
Early. But he's actually a third-year receiver, which is part of the third-year, fourth-year receivers. Yeah. Those are what breaks out. And so, why do you have number 5?
I was going to say, I'll keep mine short then, and then we'll let you tell me why he's number 1 on your list. But I agree with you. It is his 3rd year. He's got the size speed combo that you like to see. It tends to be that I mentioned Elshon just right before that. These large wide receivers, they have the ability to catch touchdowns more often. He went from 3 to 4 touchdowns. I assume that's going to go up another notch. He made a big leap from year 1 to 2 in yardage and in receptions. He's trending up 744 yards the second year. The only thing really that I can knock him, that the reason why he's number 5 and not a little bit higher on my list, is he's still the number 3 wide receiver. It doesn't mean he'll get wide receiver 3 production. And also, I'm not a huge fan of Tannehill and what they got going in that passing offense necessarily. Jarvis Landry, amazing. Devontae Parker has a ton of upside, but I'm still weary of the offense.
Yeah, it's just, I see that the yards and the catches just increasing. He went from 26 to 56 in catches from year 1 to 2, about 500 yards to 744. Touchdowns went to 3 to 4, not much of a difference, but his catch percentage went from 52% to 64% from that year. That's a pretty good leap right there. shows maybe he's on the same page with Tannehill, maybe, starting to learn a little better. And I guess I can't believe I'm buying into this offseason coach speak crap, which I try to preach to people not to. And but what I'm hearing about Parker is he's finally like understood what it means to be a pro kind of a thing. Actually, I don't know, just a little, he's eating right, he's training right, whatever. You hear this stuff, you don't usually believe it all. But because he's my guy that I'm targeting and I want him to, I think he's going to break out, I believe it all. But he was the 14th pick in the draft 2015. You don't get picked in the top 15 of NFL draft, especially at wide receiver, unless you are extremely talented. So the talent's there. It's just, does he get his head on right? Can he play within the offense? Yeah, and you said Tannehill, we're not terribly impressed with Tannehill, but I think he's good enough for what they have. They have a great running back. They have Landry, who's going to take up, a lot of attention. Stills, who's going to go deep and take up attention. I just really feel like this is the year for Parker to break out. And I'm riding on this one. He's just my number one guy. And I really think he's going to end up as a top 20 wide receiver by the end of this season. That's kind of what I'm going for. I don't like to make those kind of predictions, but I feel that kind of, trajectory for him.
One of the things I do like, because he is number 3, but at the same time, Kenny Stills, good wide receiver. I wouldn't necessarily call him, a breakout star or anything like that. I mean, last year with Miami, he only had 42 catches as wide receiver 2 and 726 yards. So Devontae Parker, even being wide receiver 3, had already matched him. And I think you kind of see that Stills tries to stretch the field. Jarvis Landry is just anywhere open so he can catch it because it's just a monster target machine. And then I think Devontae Parker could find that role where he can do both. And I think his receptions they'll be in between. He's not going to be Jarvis Landry. It's just not going to happen. But his TDs could blow up.
Well, that's the thing. Jarvis Landry's not a touchdown guy. And Stills is going to get a couple of deep ones, but he's not a red zone target.
No.
Maybe
he did catch 9 touchdowns last year, but he only had 40 or 42 receptions.
Yeah.
So what is that? I mean, he's purely down the sideline. Like, just run him as fast as you can.
And I think that's his peak season. I really think he got a decent contract. He's always been okay, but I don't know. I just don't think that much of him, I guess. I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it shows he's a one-trick pony, right?
Do you think Julius Thomas is going to take away too much? I don't think he's going to take away that much. I think he's done. I don't really think he's. I mean, there's some hope for Julius Thomas, but if I really was betting on it, I'd say he's kind of done. He flamed out in Jacksonville.
I think he'll be serviceable in this Dolphins offense, but I don't.
He's not going to take
people
away.
got really hyped over him.
Well, the thing is, if Parker is that elite talent and he's that good, he's going to overtake everybody away. It's not going to matter. His talent's going to shine, and if it's not there, it's not there. But I believe it's there. In third year, this is the time when those kind of receivers really start to break out. So that's why he's my number 1. All right, so I might as well get to my number 5.
Get to your number 5.
My number 5 is Austin Hooper. Another guy I kind of been targeting a little bit.
I like that pick.
It's hard to really go off his stats last year and really make a case for it. He's a rookie tight end. He had 19 catches. That's it. 271 yards. He only started 3 games. He really wasn't the guy. Mm-hmm. It was kind of based off just watching him play. Watched him in the playoffs. Just, I don't know, was impressed kind of with what he was doing. And that offense is so good. That's more what it is. It's the opportunity on one of the best offenses in the league. So it's not going to be a huge spiel on Austin Hooper and the numbers to back it up. It's more of opportunity. A player who looked like he can play in the work he had.
Real big body.
He looked good when, the playoffs was where finally really got to watch the Falcons. Mm-hmm. And I got impressed with Freeman. And Hooper was another guy who kind of stood out to me. So he was a 3rd round pick in last year's draft. Tight ends in the 3rd round. That's pretty decently high.
I really like that. I'm going to throw a little shade your way, though, because I did look at Hooper, and the only thing – now, there's a couple things that I worry about here. Number 1, he's an amazing blocking tight end right out of the gate. And it seems like they either use it for blocking or receiving nowadays. Yep. So I think that kind of limits it. Plus, the great offense could help a lot of players, but on that one, it's almost overly good, where you have so many other people that can catch the ball and score.
That's true.
So I was hesitant, even though he looks the part. Yeah. But I saw the same thing. I was like, it doesn't really have stats to back him up, and I just shied away because I was like, it's too early.
That's kind of when we did our tight end ranks. He came in, I think, about 20th on mine right now. So I'm not confident enough to move him up my ranks and put him against people who I think are more secure in their spots. Right. I just feel like he has that potential. If there's a player down there that has the potential to do it, he's the guy.
I give you this, though. He's much more of a sleeper than the next 4 guys I have.
All right. That's all for Hooper. There's not really much to go off of. We don't need to spend a lot of time on him. So you're number 4.
All right, number 4. This is not going to be to anyone's surprise if you've ever listened to the podcast before. But once again, hyping my man Hunter Henry. Tight end at number 4. He's with the Chargers. He looked incredibly good last year for only playing, I don't know, not small, but, less than 50% of the snaps. Gates was still there. He's a big body, 6'5", 250. Rivers loves to throw the tight end. I really don't have to spew too much more about it. But last year alone, 36 receptions for 478 yards and 8 touchdowns. So, yeah, that 8 touchdowns is a lot for a rookie, especially he would have 1 catch for 1 touchdown. So people may, say, hey, that's going to regress. But he's going to get a lot more playing time. Gates is going to go down in playing time, I assume, or either that or they're just going to have more drawn up for him because they see the athleticism. And I think not only will he be a double-digit touchdown guy, but I think those yards will at least climb to 700. At least that's what I see. And I think the sky's the limit for this guy. If it was his, 30 or something especially, and I think he goes against the mold of tight ends that take longer to develop. Besides for being especially talented, he just happened to fall into the best case scenario for him, where he got to play behind Gates. He gets to play with Rivers in an offense that's kind of already built for that. So he gets to come in and not have to prove himself necessarily, just plug and play. So
yeah, and I didn't even put him on my list, or honestly, I didn't even for some reason consider him. But I should have. It's just weird because I feel like we've talked about him and we know about him so much that it feels like he already broke out, but he didn't. He didn't.
No, he didn't. I feel like I overhype him at times, but I really am not.
We talk about him a lot and we know the talent's there. It's just but no, he had some touchdowns, but there was nothing else there. It was completely touchdowns. So yeah, there's all the room in the world for him to break out. But I mean, yeah, I didn't even consider him, not even slightly. Honestly, his name never crossed my mind. Now I'm looking, oh yeah, of course. He really is that guy who could break out there. And I think he will. He's a top 10 guy for both of us, so I think he's going to be there. All right, my number 4 is Marquise Lee, wide receiver, Jacksonville Jaguars. So,
all right.
Caught you off guard. It feels like you're not even thinking.
Really,
about
I was expecting another guy on my list, but no, I'm interested to hear this one.
And this is Marquise Lee, and he's a 4th-year receiver. Remember my Antonio Brown spiel there.
Oh yeah.
All right, I think he's kind of overtaken Hearns as the number 2 there for sure. He's better than Hearns, and he's overtaken Hearns. Basically, his rookie year, he actually did okay for rookie receiver, 37 catches for just over 400 yards. Decent, only a touchdown. Then he got hurt his second year, so the numbers don't look good. He dropped down to 15 catches, 190 yards. He did nothing. It's last year, he kind of quietly came back and had 63 catches for 851 yards and 3 touchdowns, which, if you remember all those Antonio Brown stats, Brown was in the 60 range. He had about... That third year, he had 66 catches for 787. I really think Marquise Lee is going to break out there, too. I like the catch percentage. I like looking at that. It jumped from 46 to 60 in those from year 2 to year 3. And he's completely, to me, he's the number 2 there now. Hearns is no factor whatsoever. I really feel like that offense is overall going to be better with Fournette now. It's just going to... And we're not. I think both of us aren't completely down on Bortles like some are. I think we thought he should get another chance.
Yeah, so. Some people are ready to throw him away.
I'm not thinking he's this top 10 quarterback, but I think there could be something there.
Yeah, especially good enough to supply the balls to 3 of these wide receivers.
And you remember 2 years ago when they had all those numbers, Hearns had a pretty good season.
He did.
And I think Lee is that guy now. And I mean, it doesn't even feel like when I actually looked at his actual stats, it doesn't even feel like he was very quiet for 60 catches at 850 yards. It was a very quiet 60 for 850.
Yeah, I'm actually really, really surprised. This guy completely flew under my radar.
I'm telling you, the numbers
it's such a jumbled
year
one.
2. Year 2 is the injury year. That really hurt him. Because year 1, as a rookie receiver, that's fine. That was not bad. And think about it, he only actually started 6 games. Starts are not a great stat in NFL. It just means he wasn't there at the very first play. Who knows what they went.
Right.
But he kind of became... I think that number 2 as the year went on, and I've never really been impressed with Hearns. And this guy, Lee, was a 2nd-round pick. Again, we look back, he was a 2nd-round pick.
And I remember in college, he went to USC, right?
Yep.
He was incredibly highly recruited. He was supposed to be pretty much the next big thing for a little while. And I think it was an injury in college, too, that derailed him, and he's still drafted in the second round.
That's the worry. Could be injuries here.
Yeah, but I mean,
he's a free player in a draft. He's nothing. He's a nothing
player. And I wasn't bringing up the injury because of that. I'm
no,
just
but
saying
I do worry
the
about
talent
that,
has always been there.
Yep.
And what's even more interesting now that I look into it, now that you mentioned him, Allen Robinson, obviously number one. Everyone has him very, very highly ranked.
Yep.
Obviously, everyone was judging him off of the 2015 season when he had 80 receptions for 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Massive by anyone, any stretch of the imagination. The next year, 2016, when Lee was healthy, Allen Robinson regressed only by 7 receptions, so 73 receptions, but dropped to 883 yards and only 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So my question is to you, could Lee being healthy actually have a large part in Robinson's downfall?
I think he could.
Was it a quiet factor?
I think it really was in a way because they had that extra. They had another guy to throw the ball to. No one even talked about. Like it wasn't just Robinson Hearns. It was Robinson Hearns and Lee. And I think no one really thought about that. No one was. I didn't even talk about. Did we ever bring up Marquise Lee in our podcast one time last season?
Pretty sure not.
I doubt we ever talked about that guy.
No, they were hard to predict too because there was 3 of them, and Allen Robinson wasn't even getting his share of being a wide receiver 1, so I think everyone kind of slept on the rest. Allen Hearns was a surprising one, but 2015 when Allen Robinson went off, he had 1,000 yards and 10 TDs.
Yeah.
So obviously touchdowns in general being thrown in that team definitely went down.
Well, Robinson only had 10 more catches than Lee last year, right? Was Robinson at 73 last year? That's the catches?
Yeah.
Only 10 more.
Yeah.
I think it's just he has the good potential. He could break. You look for those guys that had those kind of Antonio Brown-like stats in year 3 or year 2 or 3. Those are the guys I think could jump.
And I do really like the prediction. The only thing that worries me a bit, and I don't know what you can attribute this to, and I realize this is probably why everyone has pitchforks out for Bortles, but he went from 35 touchdowns and 18 interceptions to 23 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. So the touchdowns dropped by 12, and that killed Robinson, obviously. But it also hurt everyone else. And Lee still put up pretty decent numbers. So if those touchdowns get back up there a bit, and he can get up to, say, 6, which is very, very doable for a wide receiver 2, and probably get to 1,000 yards instead, he's a dollar guy that you can have.
He is 71st ranked wide receiver right now. So
that's a very good one. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's just he's a guy you spend nothing on. Throw him on your team and just say maybe he's going to get a lot more targets, but only 10 less catches than Robinson. So that's just I thought that was interesting. So at the very least, who's your number 3? What do we got?
Number 3 is a running back, and this one has a guy that battled injury last year, and that is Amir Abdullah. So
I like that. I didn't think about Abdullah for some reason. Again, I'm not thinking about these guys. I don't know why.
So another guy, his rookie season, he played a full season. He had 600 yards rushing with 2 TDs. He's a smaller back. And 25 receptions for about 200 yards and another TD to throw on top of that as a rookie. The next year he was supposed to kind of take over, be the lead back a little more. Immediately got hurt. So he really doesn't have any stats. But now he's back. The guy is incredibly shifty, very, very quick, and he is, I think, just without a doubt, the most talented back they have on that team.
By far.
And he can catch the ball. I think he's going to be used heavily. Third down, definitely. I think he's going to get the majority of the work. And if, heaven forbid, he finds his way into the end zone more than I think, this guy is going to have a monster year and be a top. He could easily be a top 15 back, and he's being ranked right now as if, he's barely on your roster.
Yeah, and you could get a guy in the, he's 20-something probably right now. I don't know exactly, but he's probably in the 20s, late 20s, probably as a wide receiver rank. 26 it looks like. About 26th. That's a way down there for a guy who, you don't get players down at that level who could actually just be the legitimate starter, actual guy who's going to get all the work. I think people are still worried, like Theo Riddick's going to get all these catches and stuff, but I think the real reason Theo Riddick got so many catches last year is because Abdullah wasn't there. I think Abdullah's that guy. Riddick's still going to get some, but Abdullah's not going to. It's not like he's going to go to the bench on third down every time if he's playing. He's talented. I remember that rookie season, that preseason, how good he looked. I think that's the player there could be.
I did too.
So.
And I was laughing. We're looking at one of the list Fantasy Pros, just really quickly, and in the last little bit, he's actually jumped up 5 positions. So maybe he won't be a sleeper by the time we hit the season, but he definitely will be a breakout candidate. So that's why he's number 3 for me. I love what I'm seeing right now, and the opportunity will definitely be there.
Yep. I like it. He's the guy kind of I'm targeting because I feel like he's one of those running backs you can get for relatively cheap.
Yeah. And
if he doesn't work, if he gets hurt, you're not at a loss. But if he works out, it's a huge, huge benefit to your team. You got another starting running back as your running back 3 at the worst. Like he could be your 4th. So
yeah.
All right, my number 3 player. I don't think you're going to like this guy. We've talked about him before, and you didn't agree with me. John Brown.
Okay.
And here's
as a sleeper, I don't mind.
Here we go. Fourth year guy. Okay.
Or breakout player.
Another 4th year guy. So, remembering the Antonio Brown stats again, the 60-some catches. Second year he had 63 catches. I don't remember exactly. I have him up. Yeah, he had 69 catches, 1,100 yards his second year. That was Antonio Brown. And John Brown, remember he was hyped up last year.
It was.
The reason I think it didn't happen, injuries derailed him. Because year 2, he had 65 catches for 1,003 yards and 7 touchdowns. That was a great season. In a year 2 wide receiver, he was on that pace to break out, to be one of those guys that jumps up there. Last year, injuries derailed him, so he only had 39 catches for 500 yards. That's where the problem is. He was on that path, went from 48 catches to 65 year 1 to 2, from 696 to 1,000, 5 touchdowns to 7 touchdowns. His catch percentage went from 47 to 64 from year 1 to 2. He was jumping up there. And then injuries, just whatever happened. There was, I don't even remember everything, hamstring, all that stuff. I think that was the downfall of John Brown last year. It wasn't anything to do with anything else. It's just injuries. I think people have kind of forgotten about him because of it. He was on a pace to really start jumping up there. When you really look at year 1 and year 2, he was on that path to jump up and become a really top player.
I mean, year 2, the fact that he hit 1,000 yards and he had 7 TDs alone.
That's very similar to Antonio Brown year 2. It really is.
I mean, once you start hitting 1,000 yards as a wide receiver, I mean, you've already really those numbers alone are enough to say, hey, it's almost more of a bounce back player. I mean,
it is in a way. It's just, I feel like he didn't quite break out yet. The 65 catches,
I think he could improve
there. So I think he really could jump up to like the 80s and the 1,200. I really think he has that potential.
And on an aging wide receiving core, he's going to have the opportunity.
I don't feel like J.J. Nelson and whoever else is there actually is anywhere near John Brown.
And Larry Fitzgerald, like you had talked about before, I still love the guy, but he has become a glorified tight end.
He is.
Possession wide receiver.
And David Johnson can't catch all the passes, so.
Exactly.
But I really think John Brown has, if you're looking down a list, he has a lot of potential to break out. Like Devontae Parker, I said. Like Brown and Parker, I think, have a lot more potential to become star players than maybe Marquise Lee. I like Marquise Lee, but I think Brown and Parker have much more star potential.
I would agree with it, yeah.
I think Lee has potential to jump in. His stealing is probably like a wide receiver 2. Parker's a wide receiver 1. And John Brown, we just don't know. So
yeah, that's an interesting one, though.
If we would have been sitting here after Antonio Brown's 3rd year, we would have said he could have been a breakout guy for us. We wouldn't have known how good he could have been. So that's just looking at a player again. These are guys that aren't going to cost you much, so they have that potential.
Yeah, so, I like that one for break one. He's a hard one for me to fully get behind, but I really think it's the injuries. Look at that sophomore season was crazy.
When you
good.
Look at
and that was when Fitzgerald was even obviously 2 years younger, and that's they still had Floyd.
Yep.
So
yeah, I like it. All right, where are we at? You're number 2.
Number 2. So my number 2 is a wide receiver. This guy was also derailed by injuries, and this one is Dante Moncrief.
All right.
So Dante Moncrief, once again, it's going to be his 4th season. Might as well I'm going to piggyback.
Honestly, 3rd and 4th year receivers are prime for breakouts. Yeah. That's where it is. Yeah. I'm telling you.
And once again, and nothing against speedsters, but if you do have a little bit of size, it always helps in the NFL, I feel. 6'2", 220. He's a very well-built wide receiver that's being thrown the ball by luck. So he's already in a good position. And this is what I love about him too. So first year, this one completely follows your the theory that you're going with right now.
Yep.
But very first year, 32 receptions for 450 yards, almost 3 TDs, right? It was his rookie season, and at that point, he was still behind Reggie Wayne.
Yep.
Wayne was still on the team. 2015, full season again, 64 receptions, so he jumps up by almost 30, 730 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Right there, that's awesome, and that was when they went out and got Andre Johnson. So even though he was kind of a bust there, technically he was the number 2, and Dante was the number 3. And then obviously 2016, where he was kind of a bust because everyone thought he was going to break out a little bit more. He only played 9 games, 300 yards, but he did have 7 touchdowns. And the thing I like about this, he played 9 games. He started in 7. And once again, I don't know what that means exactly.
Yeah, it's a weird stat.
If you look at it, and he only had 1 touchdown a game, but every single game he started, he had a touchdown in. And yes, that is not going to continue. You can almost bet on that. But at the same time, it just shows he's already made a role for himself in the red zone. So now if he can go off, get healthy, which it sounds like he is because his shoulder was all sorts of busted up, he can get those yards on top of that. You already saw him do 730 when he was technically wide receiver 3. He'll be wide receiver 2. And this is why I have him higher on my list than a lot of people do. I just see the ability is already there. The opportunity, it's just, can he stay healthy? And if he does, I think he's a perfect candidate for a big jump up and a breakout.
Yeah, you're higher than I am on him. I don't know why. I'm not I'm down on him. I think he's a good player. Just, I don't know. I'm just kind of, I guess it is there. I guess if that offense takes off and Luck's healthy, I mean, who it is going to be? Moncrief's numbers have to jump up.
Yeah.
They have to.
I feel like there's only so many catches you can have.
Hilton's aren't increasing. It has to go somewhere. And I don't think it's Philip Dorsett.
Yeah, he's been kind of a bust.
Third year. Another third year guy.
Been hurt. He's more of a speedster. That's fine. And their tight end isn't built for bulk.
Doyle's fine. He's just
he's fine, but
he's going to be a 60 catch guy with 800 yards maybe.
Maybe he's not gonna steal a ton from the wide receivers.
And I just feel like that offense is too good. Like Luck's too good if he's healthy.
If they can keep him upright, that's the only thing I do. That's the worry here.
He's not throwing yet.
It's almost, I worry about Luck health more than I worry about Moncrief's.
Yep. True. Yeah. That is the bigger deal with that team. If Luck's down,
because if Tolzien is throwing
whatever,
then don't listen to my advice.
All right, my number 2 player, which is actually the last player on my list because I already went over Parker, my number 1. My number 2 breakout guy is Mike Gillislee.
Okay, he was on my honorable mention,
and there's not a lot of stats to go over for him because he really hasn't been a starter, but he had a bunch of touchdowns last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's at 154 career carries with a 5.6 yards per carry over his 154 carries, and that's all good. That stuff's great. It'll look good on any other team, but he's with New England, and if he becomes their guy, if he's the Blunt guy from last year, it's gonna be great. He's gonna be a wide receiver or running back 2 without a doubt, and he'll be way up there. And I think he's gonna have that potential to break out. I think he's gonna get the opportunity to. People always, you never know which New England running back to play or something, but I still think he's the goal line guy. He's their main back. He's better than Blunt. The reason they were so much like that, Blunt was a goal line guy and he was okay, but Gillislee's better right now than Blunt is, in my mind. And he looked really good for Buffalo last year. So I'm going with Gillislee. I mean, that 5.6 yards per carry, I don't always take yards per carry into equation all the time if it's low, because there could be a lot of factors why it's low. But when it's high and it's that high, that's a pretty good number. And last year, 101 rushes, 577, 5.7 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns as a backup. And McCoy only really missed, one game, maybe a game and a half, and he still was able to put up those kind of numbers. That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it was monster numbers, and the only reason he was like number 6 on my list, the only reason I didn't put him up there is because of this, what you just already talked about, the New England offense. The one thing that could derail him besides for that is fumbles, and he didn't have 1 lost fumble last year. So really, if anything, it's just going to be depending how they use, because they have so many running backs.
If they use him like I think they're going to use him, if he actually becomes
I worry about
majority lead back.
I kind of worry about Deion Lewis just looming back there.
James White, Rex Burkhead.
Yeah,
they're all there.
And Gillislee will not be the 3rd down back. That's just that's gonna be James White.
That's not going to happen. But the only worry I have with him, because I still think he's going to be a breakout, especially from where he's been, obviously.
Without a doubt.
I start to worry that his rank is going to increase a little too much. Because we're not the only ones who think this.
No.
There are people out there. And in your league, you might have a guy who there may be a Patriots fan. For some reason, there's Patriots fans in leagues that aren't from New England anymore.
But it's true. I mean, he's very good around the goal line, and you saw Blunt pretty much his whole last year was just revolved around his TDs.
I don't think Blunt's a very good running back, and he was able to do that last year. Actually, I had him up in my ranks. Blunt, he's plummeted. I'm done with Blunt. I don't think he's that good.
I'm done with the play.
I don't think he's that good. But okay, not done. If I got him for a couple bucks, I'll take it. But that's Gillis. Gillislee's my number 2, and there's a lot of good potential there to jump up. And that 5.6 yards per carry over 3 seasons, still 150 carries. That's enough carries to get a good idea of what a guy is.
Yeah, and he has the opportunity. He could have easily made my list. Obviously that's a great pick for a breakout.
But yeah, and I guess it is maybe skewed sometimes because those change of pace guys come in and they can get it's different, but still 5.7.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a fluke. I mean, that's first of all, he had 100 carries. It wasn't like a small sample size.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good number.
But yeah, I mean, do I think he's going to be over 5 yards again? Nah, probably not.
No,
maybe
in the 4 range, probably. Yeah.
But even if he was high 4s, that'd be really good.
All right, the last guy on the list tonight. Who's your number 1?
This is going to be no surprise once again, but this is going to be Martavis Bryant. So, the guy from Pittsburgh, hopefully he got his act together completely, but and we'll just go over, once again, third-year guy. The only reason, and first year he only played 10 games.
Yep.
The second year, 11, because,
a third-year actual season with hopefully fourth year. He should be
I should say technically fourth.
He's a fourth. He's the perfect.
He is. Yeah, he's
the perfect guy for us here.
So just going over the numbers, he played 10 games, only 26 receptions, had 550 yards with 8 touchdowns. The following year, 11 games played, 50 receptions, 760 yards with 6 touchdowns.
Yep.
So, first of all, for only playing 10 and 11 games, those are already good numbers. Then he gets suspended for an entire season. But he comes back, and now he's coming back in a better position somehow. So he's actually going to be the wide receiver 2. Sammy Coates is no longer there. He's going to easily overtake Eli Rogers and the rest of the company they have. Antonio Brown's on the other side of him. There's no way you can double team him. They love to throw. He's just in the perfect position to succeed. And once again, he's also big and fast, 6'4", and he's blazing speed. So, huge touchdown guy. This guy is my number 1 because I have no idea where the ceiling is for him. If he can stay healthy, if he can stay out of trouble, and if he finds a rapport with Roethlisberger like Antonio Brown has, this guy could be a top 10 wide receiver. There's enough to go around where Antonio Brown and him could definitely both be top 10 guys. And that's scary, and that's crazy to say for a guy that didn't play last year. But
it's not unheard of to have 2 top 10 guys. Cooks and Thomas and Jordy and Adams were both up there.
Yeah, Cooper close. And Crabtree really close.
There's plenty of those situations, even before years ago, like Roddy White and Julio Jones at a time when they first started out. I mean, it's not unheard of at all.
That's why this guy, I really do want to try to get him in every single league because I think he's undervalued for good reason. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
he's definitely had a ton of question marks, but the guy's talent is undeniable.
I really don't think people should be worried about a suspension. If they do, the guy's a complete moron. But I just don't see that. I don't worry about that at all. If he does, shoot, that's
take a lesson from Josh Gordon and just
Yeah. That's a good one.
Stay in the league.
I didn't actually put him on my list. I figured you would, so I decided to leave him off. He's definitely probably.
I was going to say the same thing with Gillisley. I kind of laughed and I was hawing about who I was going to put on here. I was like, Craig will put Gillisley on. I was like, he'll be number 6.
But all right, that's it for the breakout players. So, any honorable mentions other than just some random guys?
Yeah, I did have 2 other tight ends as I was going through those rankings. Definitely not Funchess, but
third year, man.
That's true. He's a wide receiver, but all right. But,
that's just getting a little too deep.
But yeah, you could also make a case for Eifert, obviously, because of injuries and everything like that. But I think another guy that is along those lines is going to be Ebron for Detroit.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
He's another tight end. I think is his 5th year, maybe something like that. But obviously, their wide receivers are kind of been up and down lately. He's got all the talent, all the physical talent, I should say, and it seems like he was starting to put it together in the last few years. His numbers keep increasing.
Yep.
I think also this might be a contract year, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe they picked up his option, but for this, yeah.
And
he needs to.
And I would love to see stats on how well, like the percentage they jump up in production when it's their contract year, because I feel like it happens all the time.
And we didn't put any quarterbacks on this list, but obviously we've talked about it all the time. There's plenty of guys that could break out: Mariota, Carr, Winston.
Those guys are tough though, because
they're already there.
Yeah, they're kind of already there.
I think they can break into the elite category. One of those guys can. It's just they're already very good, so it's hard at quarterback because we'd have to say Carson Wentz or something if we
exactly
none of us
or Mike Glennon,
but we're not we don't believe that. So
yeah.
But all right, that's going to be it for the Breakout Players show. We'll be back with some more episodes for you here coming up. We're going to have a couple of the 5-minute shows. Moncrief versus Crabtree. We had some good reaction for that. Jeff's going to try to defend Moncrief. We did a little bit here. We'll see what he brings into it, because I think Crabtree's taking that one. So
It'll be a difficult one to win.
We will talk to you guys next time.